join us for this webinar on enabling the Philippine energy transition, leveraging cost-competitive renewable energy, co-presented by the Philippines National Renewable Energy Board and the Clean Energy Investment Accelerator. We appreciate that you could all join this afternoon, and we are heartened to share that we have close to 300 participants, stakeholders all, registered today. We know these are challenging times for everyone, but at the same time, we are now in a very interesting juncture as we set out our energy goals towards creating a more sustainable, modernized, and efficient energy economy. Our theme today is jam-packed by critically important concepts and ideas that merits this afternoon's dialogue, enabling the Philippine energy transition, leveraging cost-competitive renewable energy. Also, as I'm sure everyone here has heard, the DOE has recently issued a moratorium on new coal plants and the Competitive Renewable Energy Zone, or CREZ report, both of which took several months in the making under the leadership of the DOE and the NREB, and we are truly humbled to be one of the first public forums to hear from the Department of Energy and the National Renewable Energy Board about these developments. I am Marlon Joseph Apanyada, Southeast Asia Engagement Lead for Climate and Energy for the World Resources Institute, or WRI, and I am excited to host today's webinar, and especially as we have been able to assemble the best possible set of panelists and speakers for such a timely and impactful virtual event. Next slide, please. For the benefit of those who can't be able to join us today, this webinar will be recorded, and we also understand that NREB is live streaming this in its official Facebook page. We will also be sending the link of the recording along with the key takeaways over the next few days. We would like to acknowledge the NREB Technical Secretariat for supporting us in preparing the key takeaways. Today, we will be hearing from officials key to shifting the government's perspective from thinking of RE just as an alternative, but a priority, which was a statement we heard from our government leaders in our earlier webinar in June. We will also dedicate substantial time for the open forum, so please feel free to raise your questions in the Zoom Q&A box at any point during the webinar. Next slide, please. This webinar is brought to you by the NREB alongside the Clean Energy Investment Accelerator, or CEIA. CEIA is an innovative public-private partnership that addresses barriers to scale the deployment of clean energy solutions for commercial and industrial consumers in emerging markets like the Philippines. The CEIA is jointly led by the World Resources Institute, WRI, Allotro Partners, and the U.S. National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or NREL, and supported by the government, by the German government and U.S. government and other donors. Next slide, please. We start this afternoon by presenting the 3 Ds of energy transition, namely decarbonization, decentralization, and digitalization. In the webinar hosted by the University of the Philippines Law Center last August 7th, co-chair of the Joint Congressional Energy Commission, Senator Win Gatchalian, shared the key elements towards an envisioned energy future, one we can start seriously thinking about today. This transforms the one-way street of energy powered by fossil fuels into a multi-directional, multi-lane highway characterized by smaller-scale power plants harnessing limitless sources such as the sun and wind. Next slide, please. Tackling energy transition provides multi-pronged benefits of addressing economic slowdown through job creation and electricity rate reduction, as well as reducing health risks and curbing climate change. Next slide, please. Even before the RE law was signed, the Philippines has been able to take advantage of renewable energy. We see RE developments spike with the market-making policies provided by the RE law, but this has been growing rather modestly since, with the country's total renewable energy capacity now at about 7.4 gigawatts. Click, please. For the same period, we see a substantial increase in the country's coal fleet. Click, please. The share of RE in the country's power mix has been continuously declining, providing only 21% of our energy use in 2019. We have, on the other hand, been increasingly relying on coal, which contributed over 54% of our energy needs last year. With this brought What this brought to the energy system, however, is inflexibility. Conventional coal power plants cannot meet the rapid changes in demand due to their long startup time and ramp rate, and the plant's minimum load requirement. Coal plants cannot be operated as well below their minimum load or capacity factor, as it reduces its efficiency and creates difficulties in ensuring stable combustion, leading to outages. Thus, the moratorium on new coal is welcome as it addresses the inflexibility issue. In an interview with ANC earlier this morning, Sarah Ahmed of AIFA said that DOE's moratorium on new coal plants can potentially open up 30 billion US dollars in much needed investments until 2030. Next slide, please. And so we go to this slide. Will enabling RE policies shift the power mix? In this slide, we show the current and incoming policies in place to support the country's energy transition and drive the market to reach the necessary growth required to achieve and surpass 35% RE by 2030. We note that we are not trying to achieve 35% RE for the sake of increasing the numbers, but to provide least cost, flexible options to the consumer that also happens to be clean, abundant, and aligned to climate goals, especially for a country that's among the most climate vulnerable in the world. To be on track with this goal, we need to generate 62 terawatt hours by 2030. In the next slide, we will be sharing a recommendation put forward by AC Energy during our previous webinar. Next slide, please. Mr. Eric Francia, President and CEO of AC Energy, proposed in the aforementioned June webinar that the country needs an additional 20 gigawatts of RE going into 2030. A possible blueprint for this entails an additional 15 gigawatts of solar, 3 gigawatts of wind, 1 gigawatt of hydro, and 500 megawatts of geothermal and biomass plants to be developed in addition to 5 gigawatts of energy storage as a way to meet the 35% renewable energy target. Next slide, please. In this chart, we're just showing that renewable energy can already compete with coal. In this chart, produced by Bloomberg New Energy Finance, we see that in the Philippines, solar, hydro, wind, and geothermal and biomass can indeed already be cheaper than coal. Question is, how do we leverage on this? Next slide, please. We would also like to highlight the CREZ report, which identified over 58 gigawatts of solar and over 93 gigawatts of wind in 25 competitive locations in the Philippines. The report shows that we can have a levelized cost for RE at as low as 4.10 pesos per kilowatt hour, which I'm sure can be reduced much lower by our developers in the audience. Next slide, please. To end my framing slides, I want to show Malaysia's recent 4th round of auctions for large-scale solar. This is very fresh information from just yesterday. The lowest bid was at 0.14 Malaysian ringgit per kilowatt hour, equivalent to 1.63 pesos per kilowatt hour, and the 500 megawatt cap reached at an equivalent of 2 pesos per kilowatt hour. With our auctions and CREZ, we hope to see the WESM absorb prices like this from generators, because this solves two things: addressing ever-expanding daytime peak and to reduce prices. Next slide, please. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our esteemed speakers. In today's live webinar, we are joined by Attorney Mona Lisa de Malanta, Chairperson of the National Renewable Energy Board, who will be presenting on the ongoing RE policies, as well as the country's national renewable energy plans. With her representing the regulator is the Department of Energy Undersecretary Felix William Fentebella, presenting on the Philippine Energy Outlook. We are also joined by Mr. Reman Chua, Vice President of First Gen Corporation, and who is notable for leading the development of wind and solar ventures, most notable of which is the 150 megawatt Burgos wind project, the first wind farm in Southeast Asia. Next slide, please. Today, we hope to answer a broad range of questions in light of many developments. And please feel free to raise additional and supporting questions in the Q&A box in Zoom at any time during the program. And we will do our best to raise them to our panelists. We also encourage you to share any insights you have in the chat box. How competitive are different kinds of renewables? What can be practical considerations if we aim to have a quote-unquote energy transition? What have been keys to current success and considerations for near and medium-term opportunities for clean energy players? With COVID creating a new normal and the recently issued moratorium on new coal power plants, what does the new energy projection look like? And how do we ensure that the identified CREZ locations are utilized? What is the timeline to develop infrastructure for these areas? Next slide, please. We may also want to ask what market-making policies the DOE has in store, as was noted in this Manila Bulletin article, which would provide a pathway in addressing high power costs in the Philippines. Next slide, please. And last June, AIFA proposed this timeline and proposed activities to building back better through a more resilient energy sector by 2021. Are we on track to implementing the EVOS, or the virtual one-stop shop, and the green energy auction? Next slide, please. So with that, I want to formally introduce Attorney Mona Lisa de Malanta as our first speaker. Attorney Mona is presently the chair of the Philippine National Renewable Energy Board, or NREB. She is also a partner in PJS Law, and until her assumption of office as NREB chair, led the energy group of the firm. Attorney Mona is recognized as market leader in the areas of project development and energy, and a leading practitioner in the Asia Pacific, and has been instrumental in organizing this event, as she is keen on identifying the pain points of RE developers in the country and creating solutions to further accelerate RE transition. Attorney Mona, the virtual stage is all yours.
Thank you, Marlon. Thank you for that introduction. And I don't know if I can match your energy level, but I will certainly try. It's been a long day for me. I started out early this morning with another webinar, and it's only what 1:15 today. But I'll certainly try to match your energy level. So thank you again, and maybe just to manage everyone's expectations, I only have a couple of slides. This is actually meant to be to welcome you all to this afternoon session. We definitely at the National Renewable Energy Board are grateful for our partners. What we do in the NREB, because we, as I think most of the agencies now in the Philippines, and most of us actually are financially challenged with all the effects of COVID and all these challenges that we face. We try to make do with what we have. But what we definitely have, and it's quite I guess inspiring in the Philippines, that we are not, while we lack in resources, in financial resources, we make up for with a lot of partnerships, with collaboration. And this has been the story of the year. I think if you ask me what's the top story for 2020, COVID is not the top story for me for 2020. The top story for 2020 is the collaboration that everyone has found a way to nurture and to grow, and all these developments that we are seeing all over the world, especially in the area of energy transition, and all the net zero goals that have been coming out almost on a daily basis from different countries and states. It's really quite encouraging. This for me, I know it's only October, and we're starting with November, so there's still 2 more months for 2020. What a long year! But I think the story is a story of collaboration. So talking about stories, maybe just to frame what we are going to talk about in the next few in the next few minutes or maybe in the next hour is this series that we have co-launched with Clean Energy Investment Accelerators, the series on energy transition for the Philippines. And this first edition, this inaugural edition of this series, is just holding the holding the bull by its horn, so to speak. Talking about cost has always been like something that we avoid in the renewable energy industry for quite some time, because we feel insecure whenever we talk about cost for RE, because we know that the impression is always that RE is more expensive. If you talk about RE, that's only something that, you know, the more affluent countries or the more affluent sectors can afford. It's not something that the ordinary household can afford. But I think over the last 10 years, we've seen this narrative change, and change in a very dramatic fashion. And this is why we can talk about this competitively now, and we can talk about this confidently now, and really address this issue that has been foremost in everyone's mind in not going for the RE alternative. In the Philippines, even if we talk about energy transition, you know, for me, the discussion of energy transition in the Philippines is really not about going from something old to something new, but going back to our roots, because our industry is actually built on renewables. For several decades, with government at the helm, we have actually built an energy industry that is founded on our hydro resources and our geothermal resources. That has been our energy story. So while we have, as Marlon had shown earlier, and also have a slide on that, but I will just Marlon has prepared us so well for this discussion. While we have a significant portion now coming from coal and other non-RE resources, that is a new development. If you think about the longer history of our country, the real development really came from renewables. So how do we go back to our roots? How do we go back to being a renewables based country? So as I show there, it's only in the 1990s that we started developing coal power projects, and it coincided with the entry of the private sector in the industry. And I guess that's quite telling in itself, and maybe we can unpack that later if we have time. This is similar to what Marlon had shown earlier, but this adds another dimension to the renewables narrative, because to me, the narrative needs to include our self-sufficiency index. How secure are we as a nation now that we have more coal in our system? And since most of our coal is imported, how do we address that fact that we are exposed to that extent to whatever disruptions there are on the global supply chain, and the availability of this imported resource to fuel our economy? So this to me cannot be divorced. This discussion on sustainability and energy security. So where do we go from here? And this is why this discussion is quite important. A few weeks ago, I think 2 weeks ago, the World Energy Council released the 2020 report on the Energy Trilemma Index. We can, I'm sure there's a lot of things to unpack in that report as well, but I have a couple of takeaways from that report. One is the highlight of the report on the improvement of sustainability going hand in hand with security. So if a country improves in its energy sustainability, it follows that its energy security also improves in the same fashion and almost proportionate. Also, that those countries that are high in energy security index, who are they? They are countries that have diversified energy systems, and they are able to nourish, improve on, and develop their natural resources. That's us. Actually, that can be us because we are rich in natural resources. So actually, our scores in energy security, our energy self-sufficiency index can be high if we are able to tap onto all our natural resources. And this one is key, I think. So our challenge in the Philippines as a developing country is always this discussion on cost, on energy equity. And as one of the countries with still high electricity rates in Asia, probably the highest, maybe second or the highest, depending on what information packet you're looking at. Um, the what I take away from the Energy Trilemma 2020 report is that those countries that are high in energy equity, they are able to achieve that because they're able to give subsidies to their consumers. Now, where do those subsidies come from? Those subsidies come from the fact that they are able to tap their natural resources as well. So they have more to spare and also allow for increasing access to electricity to their population. So to me, all of this just leads to one thing. If we are able to develop our natural resources and we have the policies, the right policies to develop our natural resources, we will be able to achieve all these things, not just to get an A in the report card, because that doesn't really mean anything to us if it doesn't translate to actual benefits to our population. So the goal is really to have what I call a secure and sustainable energy system in the Philippines. So what tools do we have to get there? The DOE Charter already sets out the policy on energy self-reliance, and we're excited to hear Yusek Fuentebella later to talk about this, because I know we've been coordinating very closely with the DOE on all these plans. And we know that these are the tools that are also tapped by the DOE as we set out our plans for the next 20 years. So the DOE Charter is there. The EPIRA underscores and reiterates actually that policy on energy self-reliance that is based on a preferential bias for environment-friendly, indigenous, and low-cost sources of energy. And if there is even any doubt that's left in your mind that the Philippines is all about renewables, in 2008, we have the RE Act that is meant to accelerate the growth of this sector with the development of new renewable energy technologies and increase the utilization of RE. On our part, at the National Renewable Energy Board, these are the tools that are available to us. We are mandated by the law to evaluate and recommend to the Department of Energy the mandated RPS levels in the on-grid areas and the minimum generation capacities from RE in the off-grid areas. We're also tasked to monitor and review the National Renewable Energy Plan, and that's what we have been doing since last year. Because currently what we have in place is a 2009 National Renewable Energy Plan, and I think we all know that the world has moved since then, since 2009. So last year we started the review, we've completed the review, and we're now ready to present our recommendations to the DOE. But maybe just to share some parameters of that NREP 2020 to 2040 NREP, the goal, the target is, again, as Marlon had said, not simply a number, but to get to a level of energy security and sustainability over that horizon, that 20-year horizon. We have aligned very closely with the Department of Energy, with the group of led by Yusek Fentubella as well. And I like that it's a very collaborative exercise that we have had, and it's like if even a whole, not just whole of DOE approach, but whole of government approach, because we have the DOST also, because they are observers in the NREB, also giving their inputs, the DTI very actively helping us out in reaching the MSME sector. So that's the, in terms of environment, that's the environment that we have been working at with the Department of Energy in setting out the NREB. Also, we are recommending to the Department of Energy moving from an aspiration of 35% to making this an imperative. We need to get to at least 35% of RE share by 2030. And that's our starting point. So it's like a goal seek method. How do we get to 35? This is what we need to do to get to at least 35 by 2030. And then moving to 2040, we made our own projections. The plan is also demand responsive, so it's not simply a listing of projects, but a response to the projections of the Department of Energy also on how demand will grow. And we know that this is being revisited because of COVID and the effects of COVID. But we're prepared for that. We will respond to the demand. And the position is that the increase in demand can be met by RE with the right policies in place. We're also cost sensitive. So this plan is also driven by or mindful of the LCOE. What is the least cost of electricity that will result from this targeting of the 35%? And we think we can make a compelling case based on the cost of RE now. And then finally, this plan is also inclusive. We take note of what can be done in the off-grid areas because RE, to our minds, is not only a promise to respond to the growing economy, but also to the challenge of household electrification. Knowing that we are a group of islands, there are various resources over the different islands that we have. We need to have it as an inclusive plan so that we all grow at even the off-grid, the unelectrified areas in this 20-year horizon. So I think with that, that's all I can share at the moment. The details, unfortunately, after we submit the DOE, then maybe we can share. But right now, that's the extent of what we can share. Thank you, and I wish you all a good discussion this afternoon. Thank you again to CEIA for inviting us to partner in this webinar. Magandang hapon po.
Thank you, Attorney Mona, for this very helpful overview of the Philippines National Renewable Energy Plan. That is, as we've heard, target-driven with a hard-coded 35% goal, demand-responsive, cost-sensitive, inclusive, and synergistic. It's a Herculean challenge, but achievable through the power of collaboration. So we will hear more from Attorney Mona in the open forum. And with this, we would like to welcome Attorney Felix William Wimpy B. Fuentebella, currently the Undersecretary for Planning, Investment, Media Affairs, and the DOE's spokesperson. Prior to his current role at the DOE, he was tasked to lead the power and renewable energy programs. We are very humbled to have someone in the unique position to talk about the Philippine energy outlook, role of renewable energy in the energy transition. Yusek Wimpy, the screen is all yours.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. The Department of Energy is very happy to join everyone here. The organizers, congratulations. We'll proceed to the numbers, no? Why are we proceeding with the numbers? Because as introduced earlier by Marlon, and also mentioned by Attorney Mona, si Teacher Mona, our idol, the law professor, we have already submitted the Philippine Energy Plan 2018 base year to 2040 to the Senate and to the House of Representatives. It was finalized and approved by the Secretary 2 weeks ago. So most of the data here that we would share is from the PEP, and then we will transition to the renewable energy developments through the energy management, through the Renewable Energy Management Bureau. So next slide, please. So this is the outlook. Next slide. The PEP used the following macro assumptions. No? Why are we sharing this with you? Because we are aware that most of our participants have access to Flexos. So these are the inputs that we can utilize: the indicator, GDP growth rate, population growth rate, and crude oil price per barrel with base year 2018. Now, why am I emphasizing 2018? Because with the NREB being submitted by Attorney Mona and NREB, Attorney Mona is the chair of NREB, the recommendation being submitted to the DOE, we have been waiting for it because we will come out with the 2020-2040 Philippine Energy Plan. And next slide, please. If you would notice, the Philippine Energy Plan looks into closely these scenarios. No? The business as usual, meaning no intervention from the RE or energy efficiency sectors, to the clean energy scenario, which is our aspiration as a people. So these are our scenario assumptions. If you look at the assumptions for the RE, this needs improvement. Why? Because as I mentioned earlier, we need to wait for the NREB, no? To the update for the updating of the NREB. Why is the NREB very important? It's very important because we need not only to come up with a target or a number of 35%, we also need to have a complete resource assessment of our RE resources, renewable energy sources. And also, we have to know where they are and how we could practically connect them to the grid. Because later on, we will discuss the renewable energy policies. And the policies aims to lower the prices that are being paid for by the consumers. Because we have been branded as among those countries with very high electricity rates. And no matter what we do, we have to really focus and try to see for on each item of our bills how we can reduce the prices. No? So it's really a tough challenge because when the Renewable Energy Management Bureau comes up with a plan, the National Renewable Energy Program, or the NREB, it looks at the RE. When the Energy Utilization Management Bureau comes up with a plan, it's mostly on energy efficiency and conservation. When the Power Bureau comes up with a plan, it's mostly on what are the current mix right now for the power and how do we go forward. Not yet being putting in the EUMB or the REMB factors. But when the Planning Bureau comes in, it not only looks into the Power Bureau input, which is the business as usual, it not only looks into the input of the RE and the EUMB bureaus for the clean energy scenario, but it also looks into the GHG emissions. And it also looks into the pricing. It's closely being watched by Power Bureau, not only the pricing here in our country, but how we fare in our country versus the ASEAN, yung neighbors natin, how much they pay for electricity. So these are the challenges that we really have to face. So, next slide, please. So these are the numbers of the final energy consumption that we are looking at. You have on the right side the agriculture, industry, services, households, and transportation sectors. Next slide. So I'm sharing all these data with you. Next slide, please. So naka-divide naman siya, petroleum, etc. So yung impact ni clean energy scenario, we have a comparison here. How it affects both yung mga sectors and also yung mga sources natin, our coal, nat gas, oil, biofuels, biomass, and electricity. So next slide, please. So this is just to give you a snapshot of the clean energy scenario with the NREB, the new NREB, not yet being submitted. We were dealing with the old NREB, National Renewable Energy Program. So it highlights the way to improve further on our clean energy scenario. Next slide, please. And why do we want to improve on the clean energy scenario? No? Because even with the IPIRA, it already stated there as a state policy that we should prioritize indigenous and clean energy sources. And we have to come up with a transparent and a very transparent system, a very competitive system where we have unbundling so that there will be a clear accountability of the players. So when the RE Act came in, next slide, please. So these are all the data that we want to share now. When the RE Act came in, it was a very comprehensive piece of legislation that came out from an ASEAN country. And it talks about both fiscal and non-fiscal incentives. Next slide, please. So when the RE Act came in, it focuses on how we will look into this second column, the renewable sector, how we will increase the the share of the RE. Next slide. And how we will do so, considering the factors not only of GHG emission, not only of being indigenous and clean, but also how we drive down prices. Next slide. So with all these in play, next slide please, this is a supply mix naman. With all this in play, we have to look into the impact of total impact of the GHG emission, which is our contribution to the international community. So this is there are a lot of transitions, no? Not only the transition from conventional fuel type to clean energy sources, but also on a shift. No? Do we do this as a country alone, or do we do this with the international community? And there have been a series of treaties or agreements that we have entered into that was already ratified by the Senate. Next slide, please. So, so the role of the RE in energy transition. Next slide. We talk about the RE law and the roadmap, which needs updating. When we accelerate the RE positioning and we create an environment that is conducive to business, that's why we have the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop Act. And I was paying attention to Marlon whether or not it's being implemented properly. No, there are a lot of implementation going on. We have talked to the NCIP, including the regional directors, on how we will streamline their processes and integrate the same into the EVOS. We have also been closely working with the DENR. These are our biggest partners in the approvals of their processes, including LLDA in coming up with rules for the floating solar because they're very near the load. No? The load center is NCR and Region 4A. So we have also been coordinating closely with NGCP and the distribution utilities because I hope that the NREB will not only focus on transmission, but also on the distribution utilities, how the DUs, aside from those coming in from the grid, how the DU themselves can account for the growing RE within their jurisdictions. And how do we promote the new technologies? And how do we ask our prosumers, consumer na producer pa, and our conventional stakeholders, no? Parang nakakatuwa, no? Hindi lang pala yung stakeholders, hindi lang pala yung sources ang conventional, pati stakeholders. May conventional at merong non-conventional, yung prosumers natin. So next slide, please. So next, yeah. Nasaan na daw tayo ngayon? Ito yung kinikwento. Tumataas si coal. Nung yung declaration ni Secretary Cusi, hindi naman to nakatuon dito lang. Nakatutok siya, or he was paying attention to what is the best mix. And we see that with the RE, next slide please, with the RE coming in, no, how do we address the need for the flexible generation that is required by the influx of RE? Next slide, please. So we have this as the status of the RE contract. So what is the RE contract? It is where government, as the Regalian Doctrine, no, we are in charge of all the natural resources. How we will give our private sector that partnership in developing our resources. And we have to be serious in pre-development, development, and the operational stages. Because as government, we have to maximize our resources. So we have to enter into contracts with serious developers. Next slide, please. And we have gone through with the feed-in tariff, and we saw a good thing and also a negative. things about the FIT system. Good is we were able to introduce and push Filipinos to go into the RE development. But bad because um, it passes on the rates to our consumers, and it was done without any allocation to which DU. So yung magaling na DU, kasi tinatapon siya sa WSM, yung hindi fully contracted, yun ang nakikinabang doon sa lower prices ng market. So hindi patas yung pagpapatakbo ng FIT, which we are trying to fix, especially with the green energy auction program. Next slide, please. So, what is the green energy auction program? It is in support of this, the renewable portfolio standard. The RPS gives us a quota for the suppliers of electricity, mainly the distribution utilities. We call them as mandated participants. So, mandated because minandahan natin. Bigyan natin sila ng quota na yung 1% nyo, minimum yun, kailangan i-source ninyo sa RE. Merong malalaking DU, may maliliit. So, yung green energy auction, yun yung nag-aggregate para sa atin. No? And meron siyang green energy auction composite fee. Yung JAC na yan yung RPS composite team na magpa-facilitate ng bidding for mandated participants that are going to look for the RE sources. So, nandiyan member si Attorney Mona, ang head niyang group na yan ngayon si Secret De Lola. So, sila, grupo nila, ang titingin, no? Paano mo ka-combine yung FIT or yung konsepto ng feed-in tariff dito sa pag-address ng prices, no? The green energy auction talks about clearing price. May clearing price siya. Sino magsasabi nun? CERC. Pero dapat guided ng CERC. Kasi merong mga RE sources na mababa talaga yung presyo compared sa ibang RE source. So, depende yan sa design na gagawin ng green energy auction team. Next slide, please. So, yung RPS composite team, diniscuss, yung mandated participants, nandito rin sa ating slides. And the RPS not only works in the on-grid areas, no? Pati sa off-grid, meron tayo noon. So, yung off-grid, napag-iiwanan siya ng panahon. No? Bakit? Kasi marami sa kanyang players, maraming developers. Ang umaasa, parang pinapaasa sa Love Life, no? Umaasa siya sa UCME. So yung UCME na yun, ang nagpabagal ng development ng technology sa area. Kaya nagtatrabaho si DOE na hindi lang introduce yung RE, kundi sabayan siya na yung mga bagong development na magbibid tayo dito sa areas na to, wala na siyang UCME. Wala na siyang paasa. Kasi kailangan talaga i-push natin yung sarili natin. It's for our own good. How we will, as a country, come up with a better RE position and not rely on diesel plants in these off-grid areas na hindi na siya maganda kasi pinatabihan lang ng isa pang diesel machine pag lumalaki na yung load. So walang innovation na pumapasok because of that subsidy. Next slide, please. So even if the subsidy remains with NAPOCOR, then the new ones no more. Here is the renewable energy market. This is an introduction for the mandated participants na to have that practice of trading their certificates. 1 megawatt or 1 point is equal to 1 certificate. So, pag nagkaroon tayo ng ganyan, pwede natin i-trade. Ang nangyayari naman sa ibang bansa, nagkakaroon din ng trading, no? Ng mga renewable energy certificates. No? And thus, we have to align. And after this, renewable energy market, looking forward with the new NREB, I hope this is included in the group of Reman and sila Cholo and sila Attorney Mona sa NREB. Siguro sinama na rin nila yung pagbubukas ng voluntary market. Kasi meron tayong papasukan ng green energy option, net metering, and yung market nila, sa ngayon, under the Renewable Energy Market Rules, it goes to the DU. But it should transition also to, next slide please, it will also transition into the, what do you call this? The owner, the real investor, which is the consumer, the prosumer, to own the certificates. And here the green energy option is program is flashed on the screens. We have the permit for the RE suppliers already that was issued by the the DOE. Next slide, please. And ito, hindi pa natin naayos yung Renewable Energy Trust Fund. It's quite difficult because this should be the counterpart of the Malampaya Fund. So this is where we have as a DOE to work on and focus. Kasi this can provide us with leeway on giving out grants or assistance to developers and to innovative technologies like studies. So, next slide, please. So on the net metering, the guidebook is being prepared by the Department of Energy. Kasi may mabilis, may napag-iwanan, may LGU din na parang iba yung standards. So whether the LGU adjusts or not, kasi may provision yan sa Constitution and sa Local Government Code, naglabas naman tayo ng Local Energy Code. No? LGU Energy Code is a DILG-DOE Joint Memorandum Circular issued by both DOE and DILG so that we can have an energy application na mabilis on the LGU side. Next slide, please. Because it is aligned with the EVOS. No? So here we are streamlining the award and administration of RE contracts and the registration of the RE developers that was issued. No? We had, I believe it was in Philippine Plaza, where we had the public consultation with our traditional developers, no? Our traditional stakeholders or conventional stakeholders. And we also have this DC to provide the guidelines for the duty-free importation of RE machinery, equipment, materials, spare parts, etc. Next slide, please. So this is the JAP, which which we need to emphasize. Why did I emphasize this again? Because we have to come up with a quota already that will be covered by the JAP. And yung mga developers na nabitin sa feed-in tariff, ito yung gagamot sa problema. Yung mga bangko na namumblema sa pag-evaluate ng mga utang sa mga RE developers, ito rin yung pwedeng makagamot. Yung mga tumitingin sa presyo ng kuryente, ng rates natin, ito rin, may feature din siya, magagamot ito. So marami siyang feature na pwedeng gamitin. At sana supportive tayo, hindi tayo yung naghahanap ng butas para i-TRO na naman yung isang policy ng DOE tulad ng ginawa ng iba dyan sa mga policies ng DOE. Joke lang. Anyway, so yon. Sana supportahan tayo. Next slide, please. And ito yung mga konting ano lang to, no? Konting paliwanag tungkol sa geothermal. May resource assessment tayong kinonduct. And next slide, please. Merong tayong nilabas na parang EOXP 3. No? So yun, ipapaliwanag pa ni Secretary next week yung details tsaka ng Renewable Energy Management Bureau. So what is this? No? What is the CREZ? It's the Competitive Renewable Energy Zone. Because after the assessment of the RE, we have to know how it will be connected into the grid. And this CREZ is already an input to the distribution utilities naman. We have to identify per feeder in the DU level kung paano papasok yung distributed energy resource doon sa loob nila, especially the RE, into their system na magkakaroon ng stability sa system. So this was already out, And I think the renewable energy developers should closely look into this and look into your competitive advantages. Nasaan kayo malakas? Tingnan nyo kung nagmamatch dito. Then you will have to bid for an area. Next slide, please. So sa biomass naman, Biofuels Act, so meron tayong notice to proceed na binigay for biodiesel and bioethanol. So plus 5, no, pwedeng papasok dito sa 24 accredited projects already for both diesel and ethanol. And ilan yung napoproduce nila, ilan yung sales. And yung 2020, hindi pa tapos yung taon, so hindi pa kompleto yung data. Next slide, please. Makapansin natin, 2020, parang mababa ang sales, no? Kasi ito yung sa downstream oil. Nagkaroon ng restriction sa mobility. So, ito na yung pumasok sa renewable energy na pera. No? Ito yung investment. Ito yung trabaho. Ito yung reduction na hindi natin dapat na na-avoid nating ibuga sa atmosphere. So, ganyan yung kabuuan na pagtingin. We need to, again, be conscious of our pricing, how we can bring the cost down so that it can be truly sustainable on the side or from the demand side's point of view or the consumer's point of view. Next slide, please. So with that, we thank everyone, and the DOE is very happy to be part of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yusek Wimpy, for providing these insights. We have received online and offline several questions already. So we will be raising these to you and our other speakers to be answered later in the open forum. So, but let's hear first from First Gen Corporation, one of the leading providers of clean energy in the country. I hope my audio is fine. Yeah. So for everyone, please send a virtual round of applause to Mr. Reman Chua, Vice President of First Gen Corporation. Mr. Chua has been with EDC from 2007 to the present, leading business development projects for solar and wind, most notable of which is the company's 150 megawatt Burgos wind project. Mr. Chua graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics from Ateneo de Manila University and holds a master's in business management degree from the Asian Institute of Management, or AIM. Mr. Chua, the virtual stage is all yours.
Thank you, Marlon. Good afternoon to all the my co-speakers and panelists later, and all the participants in this webinar. Binabati ko po kayong lahat ng isang ligtas, malusog, malinis, at socially distant na araw. And I will try to make this very short but interesting. No? So I prepared a few slides for this webinar, and my objective today is to share my 2 cents worth about the transition of the Philippines to renewable energy. Can you please go to the first slide? Thank you. So I believe that it is no longer a question of if there is going to be an energy transition, but it is a question of when. And in the next few slides, I will talk about how this transition will be for us, no? And that will be enabled, I think, by at least two factors. And the first one is the pervasiveness of the power of choice, giving the consumers the choice of sourcing their power from their preferred supplier and from their preferred source. And second is the penetration of solar capacities into the supply mix of the Philippines. And when we talk about solar, I will talk about a bit about whether the affordability of solar or making solar affordable. And secondly is the question of, can we actually build enough solar capacity to meet the demand of the Philippines? And the third one is, when you talk about solar, is it worth investing money in solar? Because at the end, as you know, at the end of the day, somebody has to put up the capital to deploy these solar installations, and we have to make it attractive to those who will deploy the capital. So can you go to the next slide? First is, I will talk about the power of choice. Today, there are about almost 20 million consumers in the Philippines who are registered customers, no, of DUs, the distribution utilities in the Philippines. And out of that 20 million universe of consumers, 0.01%. You know, that's not a typo, or it's not a misplaced decimal point, but only 0.01%, or about 2,000 electricity consumers actually are able to choose the supplier for their electricity. The rest, like the 18 million residential customers, which comprise a significant proportion of all electricity consumers in the Philippines, include the over 1 million registered medium scale, micro, and small scale enterprises in the Philippines, right now do not yet have the ability to choose their supplier. So they get what they're given. So next slide, please. There is a program under the IPIRA called the Retail of 2019. The contestable customers, or the less than about the 2,000 customers in the grid now who are able to choose their suppliers, are actually enjoying lower rates, lower generation charges for their electricity. This is proof to me that when consumers are given the power of choice, they will exercise that choice. And when that power of choice is exercised, it will lead to savings for the consumers. So, and hopefully we expect that with more consumers exercise that power also, and will drive down the price of energy for them. Next slide, please. This next few slides actually talk about the case that I would like to make for solar. So just to describe this slide, this is a matrix presenting the returns, the internal rate of returns for investments made in a solar installation of about 100 kilowatts in size, costing about 80 cents per watt in terms of build. So in a range of tariff and in a range of irradiance between 1,600 to 1,800, which is the range of irradiance that you would get here in the Philippines. If you charge a tariff of about 4.4 pesos and 50 cents up to about 7 pesos, there's actually a reasonable rate of return that can be earned for an investment in a solar installation. So I just like to note that the rates of 4.5 pesos per kilowatt hour is already the generation charge that some consumers in the Philippines are paying. So solar is already not only affordable, but is already competitive. And if you install the solar system on the rooftop, where the generation can be fed directly into the residential demand, and the residential rates now are actually higher than 450. So even if you put it at 6 pesos or 7 pesos, it can compete against the full DU charges that are already being charged to these consumers. Right. Next slide, please. Okay. And we keep on hearing news, we keep on seeing news on the internet about how solar panel prices are going down. 2-3 years ago, when we built uh, the Burgos solar farm of EDC up in Ilocos Norte, the price of panels then were more than $1 per watt. But today, we are actually seeing prices of panels or EPC actually going down to as low as 80 cents per watt. And some developers are even claiming that they can build the same solar installations for much less than 80 cents. Given the same range of tariff, there is already a reasonable rate of return that can be made for investments in solar, even in areas where the irradiation is only 1600. So that's not a very sunny area, sunny part of the Philippines anymore. Now, can you go to the next slide? Right. So earlier I noted that in one of the slides that Marlon presented, um, there was an estimate that the Philippines need about 15 gigawatts of new solar capacity to the grid for an energy transition. Now then the question is, okay, we know we need 15,000 megawatts. The question is, can we build it? And the answer to that question is a resounding yes. In our estimates, using the available roof space of buildings in Luzon and Visayas between 2005 and 2004 and 2015, we estimated that there are about 230 million square meters of roof space that would be available for the installation of solar panels. Now we made some assumptions about roof orientation, roof sizes, and etc. And we came up with an estimate of about we came up with an estimate that depending on the type of building, whether it's residential, industrial, and commercial, that there is in fact more than enough roof space in the Philippines to accommodate more than 15,000 megawatts of solar. Next slide, please. Okay, so I covered this already. And this data was taken from the Philippine Statistics Authority website. And we compiled the number of building permits that were filed from 2004 to 2015. The reason that we stopped at 2015 is not because data is not available. We stopped at 2015 because we reached already our estimate of 15,000 megawatts. No? So if we count the new builds, the new constructions from 2015 to the present, then all the more that we will have more space to accommodate solar installations. Next slide, please. Right. Sorry, can you go back a bit? Can you go back one slide? So that being my last slide, I'd like to leave you with these parting words, that I think when it comes to an energy transition and an energy transition towards renewable energy, I think finding the right answer is as important as framing the right questions. To me, the question is no longer if we can afford the transition to RE. The question should be, can we afford not to? Earlier in this webinar, Marlon again quoted that in the Paris Accord that there is a commitment to reduce the temperature rise, or at least to limit it to 1.5 degrees centigrade. I would like to note that I guess what's lost in the rhetoric about this 1.5 degrees centigrade is that this is a global average. So on a country to country basis, some countries will actually experience, if we do nothing, there are countries that will experience a temperature rise of more than 1.5% to levels of temperature increases that will make those countries unlivable. So on a global average of 1.5 degrees centigrade, that's nothing if it's a flat 1.5%, but in some countries 4.5%, 4.5 degrees. So again, I leave you with these words, no? The question should not be, can we afford renewable energy? But the question should be, can we afford not to? And then if we start framing the question that way, then I guess it will help us in finding a creative solution to we face, whether we like it or not. Thank you very much, and good
Okay.
afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reman Chua. And I thank you for those insights and reframing the question of can we afford not to transition into clean energy? And I'll ask you later and get your opinions on the power of choice, especially in light of the new ERC draft on prescribing lowering thresholds for ARCOA by 2023. I think that fits nicely on the question of power of choice. But we've also gathered several questions already, and I would like to invite our panelists to please join us again. Please turn on your videos for an interactive discussion to explore how we can enable the energy transition. And so we kick off this virtual panel. Okay, Mr. Chua, Yusak Wimpy, I see Attorney Mon is already online. And okay, is Yusak Wimpy online?
Yes,
Okay,
I'm here
so
answering the in the chat box.
okay po, sige, thanks. So, Yusek, one of the questions sent to us before the webinar is that I know a large number of groups and individuals were happily surprised with Secretary Cruz's announcement. Interestingly, I asked an environmentalist who also happens to be one of the most vocal critics of DOE a decade ago, and what he thought of the announcement. And he said he was not surprised at all. He said people are used to flashy statements, but the DOE's quiet leadership has been effective way before the pandemic took over our lives. He even said that you in particular are part of the clean energy insurgency. And it's not because you're championing climate advocacy, but because your most important contribution is your incredible stubbornness when it comes to creating a playing field where genuine competition can flourish. So in light of the Secretary Cruz's announcement, what's your response to this feedback on this announcement this week?
We are surprised that you are surprised because we have been talking about it like last year pa. Attorney Mona and I were discussing this, and we just needed a validation on in running the new softwares that we have been using. And we are just continuing to rerun and to fix the documentation, but it's already clear that there is not only a need to address the clean energy scenario, but also to look into the reliability of our system. And the reliability of the system seeks or asks for a more flexible generation into the system. So the perfect generation, flexible generation power plants, no, are hydro, no, yung hydro natin. Geothermal kaya din daw, not gas, and diesel kaya lang mahal. So yun yung mga issues doon. It's just unfortunate that coal has been stuck to a base load and not being able to ramp up or down. And we have also observed that in the recent past, no, when we have red alerts, the breakdowns are caused by the big coal plants also. And we suspect, and that's being kaya nga we're running the software, no. I don't want to promote a software here. So we're running the software, and nakikita natin na baka kasi sumusunod, they're doing load following, nag-ramp up and down, and nagkakaroon ng mga boiler tube leaks, which is the usual reason for these breakdowns. So it's more of reliability. It's evidence based. We have been talking about this last year pa, before the pandemic. So pas nung nagkaroon tayo ng pandemic, there was even a move by the generators na looking into that option to shut down some of their coal plants. So parang nagtutugma-tugma siya. Kaya sabi natin, it's kaysa marami pang mag-apply for applications for coal, why not already guide these investors that look into flexible generation, look into RE development? Because RE development and flexible generation go hand in hand. So they're partners already. And we cannot do anything anymore as far as policies are concerned with RE, because it's already there in the IPIRA, it's already there in the RE law, and the DOE is there to implement these laws. So in endorsing power plants, the DOE looks at it as not a ministerial duty, but it's something that should be used to guide not only our developers but also our consumers, and to protect our consumers against yung mga hindi reliable na pagpasok ng mga plants. So that's the power of endorsement of the DOE, and that's the power of the DOE as regards the control over the plans. So that's why we emphasize the Philippine Energy Plan. We emphasize the role of NREB in recommending the National Renewable Energy Program, because these are inputs, variable inputs to our plans. No, it affects the DOE's endorsements. It affects the DOE's pronouncements. It affects the DOE's reports before Congress, before the House, before the President, and before the public.
Thank you, Yusek. And I think it answers questions that we've heard as well on what does the moratorium mean for the next 10 years and how will the figures change in the Philippine Energy Plan. I think there's just a clarificatory question on when will the moratorium policy officially come out and in what form? Will this be a department circular, Yusek?
It's already out as a form of an advisory.
Okay.
It's the documentation that we are finalizing as far as the Power Bureau is concerned. We have been delayed as far as the Power Bureau is concerned because our payment for the subscription and software na-COVID siya, na-delay siya.
Okay.
So yun na yun. Kaya kailangan rin namin maging flexible. Joke. Maging magkaroon ng ibang strategies, nakikigamit ng ibang software. So, alam na ni Attorney Mone. So, yun, that's what happened.
And then before I go over to Attorney Mona, Business World just asked, like, will these announcement actually affect the DOE's indicative and pipeline projects?
Yeah, I already answered her. I said that what will be affected clearly, yung what will not be affected are those endorsed already. Now, for those in the indicative pipeline, we can sit down with them because it's incumbent upon us also to advise our investors why this is why this was issued, why this is good for them.
Okay, And then I'll ask Attorney Mona, and then I'll also hear from Mr. Chua on the question of what is the comment of NREB on the moratorium and the opening of geothermal to foreign investors. And then for Mr. Chua, with First Gen having significant geothermal assets, what is your view on this? Attorney Mona, can we hear your viewpoints?
Okay, thank you. So, I think nabanggit na ni Yusek Wimpy. I guess nagulat din ako, Yusek. Not because it's something new, as Yusek had said, it's something that we have been discussing also with DOE since last year. But I guess it's like something good that happens in your life that when it finally comes, you're still happily surprised. So we're still happily surprised by the announcement, and of course at NREB, we fully support and we are with DOE in taking this stance, and I think we're not alone in this position. We're just aligning ourselves with the rest of the world in seeing the value that has now come out of taking the renewables track. And again, babalik ako doon kasi hindi nga ito bago sa atin sa Pilipinas. Doon tayo nagmula. So it's going back to our roots and going back on track to this path, this energy journey that we have as a country. So natutuwa kami dun sa official stance now that DOE has taken. And as Yusek Pimpi had said, this is not something that somebody thought about overnight, or that it's a dream that's not based on anything scientific or even economic. These are based on numbers. These are based on tested planning tools that's available also in the market and also verifiable by other parties. And that's I mentioned earlier that exercise that we had with the OE and continuing exercise of collaboration with coming out with a common set of assumptions. And I think that's really the way forward. Collaboration is really the way forward. The future is something that we will all share. So going or designing that path towards that future is something that we need to all contribute to. So even that discussion on geothermal, that one was what actually surprised me was the reaction. Because if you think about it, the RE Act that was passed in December 2008 already defines geothermal as a mineral resource. The Constitution that was passed in 1987 already says that FTAAs, or Financial Technical Assistance Agreements, can be entered into by the President for petroleum, mineral, and mineral oils. In 2009, when the DOE first issued the guidelines for the awarding of RE service contract, it also defines, as stated in the RE Act, geothermal as a mineral resource, and also has a section on awarding of FTAAs. So that's in 2009. When the DOE conducted a public consultation for the Omnibus Guidelines, I think they started in 2018, but I was part of it when I got appointed in NREB last year. So we became part of the public consultations from the Omnibus Guidelines. And then the DOE also issued the Omnibus Guidelines in final form DC. It also has that section on FTAA. So to be honest, I'm surprised that people are reacting now because it's been there. And that is the basis for the secretary's announcement. I guess the surprise is, or the reaction comes from the fact that, to be honest, there has not been an awarded FTAA for geothermal. But maybe because this is also the first time that the DOE will conduct an OXP for geothermal. First time to conduct an open competitive selection process for geothermal. So there.
Thank you, Attorney Mona, for giving us a RE Law
Sorry.
101.
I met my students this morning, so fresh
yes,
pa siya.
yes.
Yes, ma'am. Pakipasa po ako.
And then,
sa midterms namin yan, sir, actually.
Mr. Chua, would be curious to hear your thoughts as well.
Well, I think any investment promotion strategy that is rolled out, I think should be seen as positive. And I think it is significant that this particular investment promotion strategy targets geothermal, because I think that underscores the importance that the government puts in developing our indigenous energy sources, that's aligned with our in promoting our national interest of gaining or achieving energy security and energy sufficiency. Diba? So I think we should look at it that way.
Okay. So I think another important question to ask is, this is from our colleagues from the think tank AIFA. What is your view on gas in terms of whether it's a viable solution, but with lock-in implications, considering the deflationary trends in RE and storage? Yusek, you mentioned that nat gas will be part of this, uh, of the hydro geothermal, nat gas kind of like
Yes,
uh, combination as a result of this moratorium.
that's
So what
right.
are your view on nat gas, Sec?
The Department of Energy, Secretary Cruz, has been pushing for more options, not only RE, but also nat gas, pati nga nuclear, kinagat na namin. Ano pa bang pwede? Volcanic ba? Pwede pa? O ocean? So, all these we are trying to explore. It's just unfortunate that the Malampaya is only catering to certain power plants, but in flexibility natin to come up with the nat gas industry, aside from Ilihan and first gen plants, kailangan pa ma-develop. So we are pushing for the FSRU, or yung mga floating units for nat gas, that we can have that ability to import. But there's an impact also on the US elections, because Biden right now is leading, and he has this plan to, like, no new fracking or permits for public lands, and at the same time, no subsidies for conventional fuel. So may impact siguro siya ng konti sa pricing. I'm not sure how it will impact. But the DOE, the Philippines, has to continue to come up with new strategies and other options, which includes nat gas. No? And our
Mhm.
what we are doing is we are um, making use of our comparative advantage, our strategic location, not only to provide nat gas for the Philippines as an option, but to position ourselves to be the hub for our neighbors also. Because,
Mhm.
for example, in Singapore, no offense naman sa kapatid natin sa Singapore, no? But they have very small land. So they may need our support, no? Kasi malapit tayo sa kanila, for providing these hub, no, a nat gas hub that we want for our region. Because we don't want only to come up with mga strategies on geothermal, but for nat gas also, hindi lang pang Pilipinas sana, kasi laki ng lupa natin, laki ng potential. We can also provide that as a hub for our area, our region.
Okay. Thank you, Yusek. We're flooded by questions, and if time does not permit, then we will hope to cascade these questions to our speakers and uh, answer them offline. But as Attorney Mona mentioned, this is like as a part of a series of webinars, and so we will take note of these questions as they come. Right now, I think it's really interesting, Yusek, what you mentioned about the local energy code, which is a DILG DOE collaboration. Is there something about DA DOE collaboration para on this new trend of agrivoltaics, like having agrivoltaics, and talking about collaboration, which is also what Attorney Mona mentioned? can there be a DOE, DOF, DSP collaboration as well, so that we can finance all these needs and address Mr. Chua's point of facilitating power of choice. I'll hear your thoughts at USEC and then Attorney Mona on that.
Yeah, I think I answered already the DA-DOE collaboration through that signing of a memorandum of agreement between DOE and DA. It was on the first year anniversary of DA Secretary William Dar, no, as DA Secretary. The collaboration includes three synergies. No? The first synergy is the utilization of the downstream industry sources to support the food value chain. So may nakikita ka nang nagtitinda ng mga gulay, prutas, isda, agri-products sa mga gasolinahan. So, and yung fuel assistance ng gasolina. Pero yung pangalawa, doon ang medyo nakaka-touch sa topic natin ngayon. No? It's the development of renewable energy in food production. It engages into, we engage into a pre- and post-harvest facilities that are RE powered. And it can reduce the prices or increase the income. So, pwedeng bumagsak yung presyo ng bigas, for example, ng 25%, or mag-increase yung income ng 25% ng mga nasa value chain. Kasi pag gumamit sila ng RE facilities for food production or yung pre- or post-harvest facilities, nagiging zero yung ano nila, yung cost ng fuel, no? So, ano yung computation ng Bureau of Agriculture and Fisheries Engineering ng DA? 40% of the price of rice is manpower. So, 40% of that is manpower, and 70% of the manpower is machineries. So, that's 28%. So, yung machineries natin ma-provide ng DA to the Modernization Act of ng agriculture facilities natin. No? And magiging zero yung fuel, whether they use biomass, they use RE, yung sarili nila, solar or hydro, whatever they have in their area. So that's 25%, no? Na kasi 28 naman talaga eh. So it's around 25% na pwedeng maging impact sa prices. So that's the second one. The third one is the collaboration between the use of the facilities of electric cooperatives in the value chain.
Okay.
So yung nagde-deliver DTI, pa-deliver ako ng online ko ng solar powered, baka pwedeng tumambay muna yung bagsak ng produkto sa Eco. Depende sa Nueva Ecija, Quezalco ba o Batelec ba. So maraming options ang tinitingnan dun sa DOE-DA collaboration. Meron din tayong DOE-DTI collaboration because yung standards naman ng pag-install at sa mga gamit ng RE facilities na RE na gamit na pumapasok. We're working on that, on how to improve it and keep it up to date. The DOE, Department of Education, last mile provision of electricity in those schools that are off-grid, not connected. We already have a model and nagbayabang pa yung PNOC-RC na dun pa nilagay sa battleground area sa Barangay Kagay, Talipao, Sulu. Doon pa kami nagkabit ng RE facility na may battery, na meron silang solar, merong battery, merong projector, merong laptop, merong 1 terabyte of Department of Education software materials, pwede manood ng movie, pwede manood ng video, animation, may libro. Okay. So, haba ba? Dami mong tanong eh.
Kasi we're constrained by time, but we appreciate the collaboration of DOE with various
dami akong kwento. Sige,
with the different agencies. But Attorney Mona, especially on the energy finance nexus, what can we do to facilitate that? Because we're on the topic of enabling the energy transition.
Definitely. I think collaborations like what Yusek Wimpy had said is critical to meeting that target of financing. Again, the projections that we made, for example, for the NREP, is based on the existing service contracts, for example, that have been issued by the DOE. The assumption is that all these contracts will be realized. But in order for that realization to be met, we need to allow these projects to access markets and to also access financing. So we need to really work on access to financing for these entities. Maybe that collaboration or that arrangement with BSP is possible for maybe for DOE and BSP and DOF to allow that. But even I think among the private sector, we can already mobilize the financing to lead towards all these energy projects, because all these signals are seen by everyone. The banks see these signals from the DOE. The banks also see more than 100 more than 100, I think, based on the IEEFA website, right? More than 100 banks and financing institutions already declared that they will no longer be financing coal projects. So where will they put their money in? So it's up to us to put together that package so that they can divert their financing, their free cash to all these projects that we have. That's how we can work together. DOE is also working on their own, but I think on the part of the private sector, there's already a lot that can be done. Maybe I can just also mention, because I saw that part of our audience is DTI Director Raquel Echage, who's also a member of our NREB and who has been so instrumental in putting together our initiative to have the GEOP be accessible to our MSMEs. Because as I think Reman had shown earlier, one untapped or one still locked market for RE is really our MSMEs. And the promise is not just so that the MSMEs can have access to clean power, but also to more affordable power, because that's what, at the end of the day, that's what we want also to be able to promise to our consumers.
And thank you, Attorney Mona, for mentioning GEOP, which fits squarely on the statement of Mr. Chua on the power of choice.
Yeah.
So I'll put this I'll put a highlight on this. So how do we facilitate power of choice, Mr. Chua? I know there's a draft ERC uh, rule prescribing that the RCOA be open to up to 10 kilowatts threshold by 2023. What is your personal opinion, or what is First Gen's opinion of this, and or general viewpoints on this topic on the power of choice?
Thank you for that question, Marlon. I think the answer to that question is actually what you said, no? That we already have the GEOP. It's already provided for under the current regulatory frameworks of the RE law, as far as the GEOP is concerned, and the renewable portfolio standards. And it's also provided for under the EPIRA in terms of the retail competition open access. So the only thing that we need now is actually for these policies and guidelines to be approved and implemented so that we can start. From a developer perspective, from an RE supply perspective, we are ready to go. Right.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chua.
So
And
in the field of dreams, they say you build it and they will come. We've already built it, so come already.
And apologies to the stakeholders who have raised questions related to the coal moratorium. We will officially collate them and send something to the DOE for official recognition of those questions and possible answers. I will facilitate that via the Clean Energy Investment Accelerator. I know we're already out of time, but we would like to cover items that are not usually talked about, like offshore wind and floating solar, right? It was mentioned by Yusek Wimpy. Attorney Mona, are these something that we are seriously looking at now that we are in this topic of enabling energy transition and these like new technologies?
Definitely. Yeah, I think Yusek already mentioned the the efforts for floating solar. I think two things that we want to mention there. We're waiting for the LLDA to issue their guidelines for the floating solar projects for the projects that will be located in the LLDA area. Second, and to me, this is really the low-hanging fruit for floating solar. We have a lot of hydropower projects that are impoundment hydros. Those dams can be used also for floating solar, and we can expand even not just the capacity of those dams, but also their operating time. For example, because most of these dams, they don't operate during the summer months because the level of water is not sufficient for their operations. But if there is solar there, then that's what we can explore, so that we can expand also there. They can operate more in more days of the year than their current operations. I think there are already impoundment projects that that have a demo or pilot program. So we hope they can already have sufficient data so that they can also be brought to commercial scale. For offshore wind, I think I'm just not sure if the CRES already identified the transmission requirements for offshore wind, but we do have offshore wind developers already in the country. They're already looking at certain areas, particularly in the north of Luzon, and I think in the Mindoro area, good resource for offshore wind in those areas. Our dream is to have what Taiwan recently have, the development of their first offshore wind projects.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Mona. And uh, we will have a lot to cover in our succeeding webinars, Attorney, because we have to talk about the implications of the coal moratorium on pipeline and indicative projects. What does the natural gas policy look like vis-a-vis renewable energy goals and ambitions, as well as when the NREB will be finally submitted and what is the current form. And those are things that we can talk all day. Unfortunately, we are limited with time. So I think as a last question to everyone, I'll start with Attorney Mona, then Yusef Wimpy can weigh in. This morning, it was mentioned that at least this announcement on the coal moratorium would open up like 30 billion US dollars or about 15 gigawatt in new RE in potential investments until 2030. So, but how do we, on the government side first, and then on the private sector side, what can be done to really facilitate these investments and attract these investments to happen with the right support and permitting processes? So, Yusek, I'll give the floor to you first, since you're nodding.
Natatawa kasi naalala ko si Show Me the Money. Anyway, I think it's really the green energy auction. It combines everything already, no? Least cost, diba? Akala mo si Reman lang may mga movie, Field of Dreams. Show me the money. Okay. So, as a Filipino kasi na in charge of all these, we really want to promote the Philippines. But at the end of the day, it's a competitive selection. It's really competition because porke RE ka, papapasukin ka namin. Hindi. Dapat quality ka, dapat least cost ka, dapat maayos kang kausap. So, it all boils down to auctions. No? The green energy auction is among those na pwede na talagang gamitin. Kaya I'm asking the member of the RPS composite team, Attorney Mona. Okay, go. nasa inyo na po ang bola. Okay.
Thank you, Yusek. I think we are preparing for the first auction to happen as originally scheduled, which is during the first half of next year. Actually, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but DOE is also keen on having this done. In fact, there is already discussion on getting international support for this, just to make sure that it happens as scheduled. Why is timing important? We see the green energy auction, as Yusek Wimpy had said, as a component or forms part of a successful RPS program. RPS will not RPS is okay for the next few years. We have enough fit volume to meet the RPS requirements, but we don't want to stop there. We want that volume to grow over the years. And it can only grow if we have new plants that will come into the system. We don't want a market that's just purely trading certificates without new capacity, new volumes coming in. We want capacity. So maybe if we can do a cheer, we want capacity and all that. That's what we want. So that one, and also the my personal favorite actually is the GEOP, the voluntary market. That's where we hope the growth will really come. It because it's really the grassroots that will move us towards the direction of more RE. People will need to have ownership over this vision that we want, and they can translate that ownership into action by participating in the voluntary market. So I think key really is the GEOP for a really grassroots level for this RE movement, and then on a national scale the RPS. So in other words, all the ingredients for success so far is there, but we need to make it happen. And the way to make it happen is really for us to move together and mobilize our whatever resources we have. So para siya multiplication of loaves. Whatever bread and fish you have, we'll put it together and we'll make it happen in 2030, 2040 and moving forward.
Thank you, Attorney Mona. And Mr. Chua, any reactions to that, especially as a pioneer and large-scale developer with different interests on different RE assets?
Well, from a developer's perspective, I guess the only thing I can say is, as a developer, we're here. We're fully invested in the Philippines, and if the energy industry grows in the Philippines, that is a welcome development, and we hope that we will be able to
What happened?
I think nag-freeze si
I think
Mr.
we lost
Chua.
Reman.
Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Reman?
So we have already announced. Yes.
Go ahead, sir. Your Wi-Fi just froze a bit.
nag-freeze ka. Again, take
Malamig
two.
kasi
Ka namin
yung
narinig.
Take two.
malamig yun. Okay,
Take two, take
take
two,
two.
take two.
No, I was just saying that as a developer, we fully support any initiative, activity, guidelines or policies that promotes the growth and development of the Philippine power industry. As a purely Philippine-based developer, we are fully invested in the industry. In fact, we've announced significant investments not only in LNG so far, but also in RE projects, in the country in the coming years. And as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to providing supply, we're here. We're ready to build it. Some we've already built. We're just waiting for customers to come and for customers to be allowed to come and sign up with us. So we're open for business.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Chua, for such a strong finish. Again, a virtual round of applause to Attorney Mona Di Malanta, Yusek Quimby Fentabella, and Mr. Reman Chua. Can we take this a moment to open our video so that we can have a virtual photo op? I'll count from 1 to 3. Let's all smile, and then let's have our secretariat screenshot this. Okay, 1, 2, 3. I hope our secretariat was able to take that picture. And thank you everyone for for close to 200 people still on our webinar. I know we've gone 15 minutes past our allocated timeline. But thank you all for joining us today. And we would really like to acknowledge the invaluable support of the NREB TechSec, headed by Ms. Cherry Hulongbayan, Gail Bitara, Angelica de los Santos, Michael John Domingo, and Jorik Alimon. Thank you, NREB TechSec. If you wish to contact me and continue the conversation, I can be reached via LinkedIn. My name is Marlon Joseph Apanyada, and my email is indicated here. And as mentioned earlier, this is just the first of a series of dialogues about enabling enabling the energy transition in partnership with the NREB. And thank you, Attorney Mona, for being our leader in this series of dialogues. So with that, maraming salamat po. Keep safe, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you. Thank you, Yusek. Thank you, Reman.
Thank you, Yusek. Thank you, Sir
Dapat
Chua.
nag-cramp ako sagutin yung mga tanong. Pero okay, tama na.
Thank you.
Thank you po. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.